Way I won't be screaming at you, but hopefully we won't get too passionate together. Hello, everybody. Happy summer. It is so wonderful to see you all, and thank you for coming out tonight and learning with me. We have a great book to explore together, but more than us studying the book, we're going to have opportunities in many respects throughout this evening to study and learn with each other. But we can't do that unless you know who are the people sitting around you. So let's begin, as we do in our community, by stand up, turn to the people behind you, turn to the people next to you, wish them hello, happy summer, Kait Naim if you feel really Hebraic. Introduce yourselves. You could tell people that you're the president of the synagogue and they will believe you. I would believe you. Very nice to see everyone. I do not want to discourage the lovely reconnections that are unfolding here, but I'm going to ask you kindly to take your seats, because we have a lot to cover. How many of you have read the book? How many of you have read the book that we're going to be studying this evening? That is great. Parts of it, columns, page 1, but haven't got past it. Somebody said, I've read his book 6 times. I just can't get to page 2. Thank you very much for that. So you don't need to have a working knowledge of the book for us to study together. Moreover, you're looking at the study sheets, don't get too engrossed in them because they do not contain exclusively words from the book. In fact, there are very few excerpts from the book themselves, and that is because I would like for you to read the book. And hopefully after tonight, you'll be inspired to read the book. So I want to begin as if we had the great honor of welcoming David Brooks. Now, if you've read his columns, you know he is a prominent writer, journalist, and op-ed columnist for the New York Times. And as of late, if you've been following him as of late, his columns changed dramatically since he wrote this book. And that's good, because what we're about to discuss tonight is about how one really makes a change in their lives when they know that that is a change that would serve them well, that might be a journey towards discovering the self that they were always meant to be. But for whatever reasons that we have in our lives that limit us from that possibility, this is something that he has achieved. And he is teaching us what it must be like to make a change, to really discover yourself, to really grow. So we've welcomed David Brooks. Here's a man who's been on a journey and has grown and changed and has something to teach us. Let's meet him at least through the papers, because he wrote this for us. So open up the booklets that they have. Everybody have a copy of the booklet? Great. Hi, Carol, come on in. We just got started. It's a great way to begin. I'll do a little bit of reading, and then I would like for anybody who would help us do some reading a little bit further on, because we have much to study and explore on the text that you have before you. I guess I wrote this book to save my own soul. That's how he begins. I guess I wrote this book to save my own soul. It gives me chills. About once a month, I run across a person who radiates an inner light. These people can be in any walk of life. They seem deeply good. They listen well. They make you feel funny and valued. You often catch them looking after other people as they do so. Their laugh is easy and musical. Their spirit is infused with gratitude. Wow. Are you thinking of anybody that you've met like this? Yeah, good, right? Because he meets these people once a month, so chances are you did too. They are not thinking about what wonderful work they are doing. They're not thinking about themselves at all. An encounter with such a person can brighten your whole day, but I confess, I often have a darker thought. It occurs to me that I've achieved more career success than I ever imagined, but I have not achieved that. I have not achieved their generosity of spirit, or their depth of character, or their inner light. I wrote this book because I wanted to be a bit more like those people. I wrote it because I want to have moral adventures that will end up making me deeper and better. I know reading and writing a book can't make you incandescent in that way, but I wanted to describe people who made that journey from shallowness to depth, from fragmentation to integrity, from self-concern to service. I thought I could at least describe the path people took toward that sort of goodness. Then I could try to make my own journey in that direction. I could find others who would take this journey with me. I also wrote it because I wanted to shift the conversation a bit. Let me pause for a second. Everything that he says up until this point is so deeply self-reflective. It is so deeply internal. The reason we've invited David Brooks to sit next to us and to hear these words is because it's as if he is explaining to us who he is, where his humanity rests. And he's sharing with us how bold and courageous it is to be able to bare your soul, to say, I need to grow my soul. How often do we, A, have the opportunity to ever share that with anybody, even the most intimate relationships that we have, and then B, to be able to share it and to describe a journey in which the result is actually moving in the direction of that attempted growth? How often can somebody say, I want to be better, but really tell the story about how that better actually became? He has something to share with us. There's something really deep here. There's something deep here, and while he's Jewish by birth, and we're going to study that he derives this depth from the wisdom of the Jewish tradition and one of its greatest teachers in the 20th century, the wisdom that he has to share is something that even transcends Judaism itself. He's getting to the core of what it means to be a human being. And it's something that we don't often think about in this respect. We talk a lot about the academic nature of what it means to be a human being. Philosophically, how should we think? What should we look at? How should we see the world? What sense should we make of the world around us? We have a lot of wisdom to teach about that. But how to be, and moreover, in his teaching, how to be good. It's enough to know how to do good. We have a Torah for that. We have mitzvot to tell us how to do good, but how to be good, that's something that takes what he calls character development. And he's inviting us to be on the road to character. And the last paragraph is so important. And did anybody read his, he actually just had an op-ed article this week. It was all about money and privacy and the combination between Native American culture and European culture in the 18th century. So it's a digressive point, and we'll come back to it later. But he's writing about the fact that this is not just simply about one person's journey when he wakes up one day and realizes that he wants to be better than he is. This is, at its core, a human experience. So look at what he says. I wrote it because I wanted to shift the conversation a bit. What conversation he's talking about? I assume it's the one that he's been responsible for. He wrote a book called The Social Animal before this. His op-ed columns have him to talk about the nature of culture and society. So maybe he's talking about that conversation. We live in a culture that focuses on external success. We live in a fast, distracted culture. We've lost some of the vocabulary other generations had to describe the inner confrontation with weakness that produces good character. I'm hoping this book can help people better understand their own inner lives, their own moral adventures, and their own roads to character. Now, that was taken from the website, but it's also all over the book. And when you pick up the book and read the copy, I wish I had it out here, and if he knew that I was selling 40 copies tonight, I would get a little bit of like a little royalty, a kickback on the side. That would be so nice. Rabbi's recommending books. You should read this book. It's one of the important books of our day. And Menashe, my friend who's sitting in the front, knows very well that being a student of Musar literature and a very deep, thoughtful tradition that has emerged out of Judaism, to think like this, there's a lot that our tradition has to say that complements and even inspires what David Brooks is teaching us tonight. Now, here's what I'd like for us to do. I'm going to give you a few minutes of leeway and a few minutes of preparation time, because I want you to take a few minutes and to begin to practice a little bit of what he's been talking about. So once we go through some of the study of the book and what it's all about and why we're talking about this subject at this particular time and on this particular evening, we're sitting in this room having this conversation, I want you to turn to somebody. It could be the partner, the friend that you came with. It could be somebody new that you had never met before. But I want you to find somebody and look at the bottom of the page. These are the questions that I want you to share. David Brooks opened up his soul to us. What is it like when we begin to open up our souls to each other? And tonight, if we can practice a little bit of that, we may be a little bit more successful than even he expected. So what we'll do is take a look at the bottom of the page. I want you to begin thinking, as we're studying the text and he tells us a little bit about this subject, I want you to think about 3 defining moments in your life. Maybe they have already come to mind. 3 defining moments in your life that you would say define who you are. 3 moments that happened. 3 qualities that you possess, embody, that you think about, that you practice in the world around you that define who you are. Not only ones that you think if somebody else was in the room and you weren't here and they were describing you, what they would say about you, but it's the ones that you would say about yourself and that others would agree are who you are. Now, don't worry, because that can be a little bit overwhelming and scary. And the first answer says, I don't know who I am. Don't make me do this, Rabbi. This is too scary. And I understand that. Don't worry about that, right? Because A, these are not forever qualities. Okay? Don't think that these are forever moments. And I think that's kind of scary for us when we talk about meeting other people and trying to get to know each other. We try to figure out who we are, and we want to give the best example of ourselves. And I think that that's sometimes challenging. Sometimes I think it's clear and easy to understand, and it's very apparent in your life. It may even be the story that you tell your children and your grandchildren over and over again. You might have forgotten that you told them the story and you're telling it to them again because that's an important story for them to know about you and about the world as you see it. Go ahead. Tell those stories too. But they don't have to be forever moments, and those don't have to be forever qualities. And even more so, they may be qualities that you would like to have, but you don't yet have. And how even more courageous would it be if we had a few minutes together sharing with a friend, sharing with a new friend, a little bit about those qualities that you don't yet have, that you would like if your dream were realized. If your dream came true, what quality would people come to know of you and say about you and to celebrate in their knowledge or in their experience or in their being with you? That's what he's talking about, and I want us to talk a little bit about that too. So hold on to it. Don't worry. Anybody got an idea already? How you doing? Are you thinking? Good. Start thinking. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, I think that, how's it sound? Is it okay? Yeah? Okay. I think that what we're talking about here is not necessarily some philosophical concept that we read about in a book and in some way apply to us as an external tool to correct our human impulse. The Torah, by design, is a very sensitive and intuitive social document. It understood human nature and the nature of human community, and it tries to create, through its process of revelation and of transmission, a society based on a certain set of fundamental values that it has learned through experience. Right? The idea that we should, ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha, the Torah's one of the most central Torah rules, love your neighbor as yourself. Sense of empathy and compassion that is woven through verse and chapter of the entire Torah, that sense of compassion, that sense of ethical responsibility that we have towards other human beings, that's something that is born out of experience. And what I wanted to introduce by way of this explanation is that when we talk about character, it's not something that we introduce into our bodies as a corrective to our human impulse. In other words, character isn't something that we don't possess, but with the right teaching or the right experience or the right teacher and the right people and relationships or the right environment in which we place ourselves, that character can emerge. In fact, the fundamental idea is that character being is something that is a part of us, and it either needs to be revealed or it needs to be cultivated. But it's not something that is taught alone. Heschel had a great quote. In fact, if you walk outside after the study tonight, I think it's on the wall because we use it in our school. We say Judaism is caught, not taught. Judaism is caught, as in it is something that is received, but your capacity to receive it is something that comes from your body. It's not something that is poured into the top of your head, and you're not just given a sense of being from a book. It has to be understood. It has to be felt. It has to be turned into texture. And knowing that that's true, that feels very true to us. It's even more remarkable that David Brooks, in writing this book, makes the comment, it's that last paragraph comment. We live in a world that doesn't spend much time talking about that catching of character. In fact, in his mind, as we'll read in a few minutes, it seems like we spend a lot of time talking about success and meaning and purpose is in what we build and what we create and what we produce. And all of the values and the sense of satisfaction and the sense of accomplishment and the sense of purpose that we feel is what we create. And we could even say that that's also like values, character values. We built a strong character, so therefore we could go out into the world and tell everybody how strong and how capable we are and how resilient we are and how hopeful we are because we learned to be that way, by gosh. We picked ourselves up from the bootstraps, and because we've done that, we are people of character. And he's telling us, no, that's not the world. Now, how did he get that idea? How come we can't just keep teaching everybody that if you pick yourself up by your bootstraps a little bit more harder, you'll be just fine. You'll be a person of character. How come we can't start from that? Why is it that we need to look at this differently? So he writes in his book, he says, he was, I think, what did he say? He writes about, he's a shallow person, which I don't know. I don't know about you. It's sort of like humble bragging. Have you ever heard humble bragging before? Humble bragging is a new term where somebody says, shucks, I'm so honored to be invited to the president's house. I can't believe that he asked little old me. That's humble bragging. Because you know what? For whatever reason that you got invited to the White House to meet the president, that's a pretty darn good reason, and you should celebrate that. And you should be proud of that. But don't like make yourself smaller because you think other people will like you more. That's humble bragging. He's not humble bragging when he calls himself shallow. He's certainly a successful person. Wrote books, he's got a great column, he teaches at Yale University. This guy's no schlub. So how could he say that he's shallow? How could he look at all these positive people and say he doesn't have the character qualities that they have, so he has to write a book to figure it out? When that's the foundation, the beginning, now we can begin to open up. What David Brooks did was genius. He went into the Jewish tradition. Could have gone into other traditions, and believe me, I've heard him quote plenty of other people. Reinhold Niebuhr, who's a 20th century theologian. Soren Kierkegaard. He's going to quote Immanuel Kant. He knows all of the people. He can quote the smartest people that were ever on the planet before him, but he goes to a rabbi, a man by the name of Joseph Ber Soloveitchik. You ever heard of Soloveitchik? Oh, yeah. We've taught Soloveitchik around here before. Soloveitchik wrote an article in the 60s called The Lonely Man of Faith. You ever heard of that? We've read it here before. I know that it's been studied here before. I excerpted a little bit of it because it becomes a part of the foundation of his book. So flip to the back of the first page, and there you'll see Adam 1 and Adam 2. This is in the introductory chapter of The Road to Character. He begins almost on the first page talking about studying Soloveitchik and studying Adam 1 and Adam 2. So I want to take a few minutes and I want us to study together. Who would like to read a little bit of this essay, which was a transformative essay in the life of modern American Jewry, in which he outlines these characters entitled Adam 1 and Adam 2. So who just read a little bit, and we'll read a couple paragraphs. This is not all one contiguous narrative. I've actually excerpted a bit of it so that we can get a flavor of what he's talking about. Anybody like to read? Thanks, Jane. Nice and loud.
My teacher's voice.
Yes.
The nature of the dilemma can be stated in a 3-word sentence. I am lonely. Let me emphasize, however, that by stating I am lonely, I do not intend to convey to you the impression that I am alone. I, thank God, do enjoy the love and friendship of many. I meet people, talk, preach, argue, reason. I am surrounded by comrades and acquaintances, and yet companionship and friendship do not alleviate the passional experience of loneliness which trails me constantly.
That's great. Stop right there. Thank you. And Louise has a microphone, so why don't you pass it to Jane because she's going to read the next paragraph again. Jane. Yeah, that's Jane.
Dentist, your CPA.
Yeah. She's like, all the other people connected in the family.
I'm sure.
3 words. 3 words. I am lonely. Now, he didn't say that he's alone. In fact, he's not alone. He's a big-time rabbi. He is called most famously as the Rav. People say of the 2,000 rabbis that he ordained, they will tell you with great pride, I got smicha from the Rav. Now, what's amazing about that is, first of all, they say the Rav. What is being said in that one little statement? Welcome to America, ladies and gentlemen. Is that what you're going to say? The is an English word, more or less. Rav is a Hebrew word. The Rav. The Rav. And over a 50-year career of being the dean of the Rabbi Yitzhak Elchanan Theological Seminary at Yeshiva University, he was the dean at Yeshiva U. He ordained over 2,000 rabbis. 2,000 rabbis. I am proudly a part of the 5th ordaining class of the Ziegler School for Rabbinic Studies. There were 10. It is now approaching, so let's see, we're approaching the 19th year of ordination. Okay, it's the 20 years of the school, and then this year will be 19 years of ordaining rabbis. In 19 years of ordaining rabbis of roughly 10, how many are we talking about? 200. Come on, let's play 200. We got engineers here. They're really good at math. 50 years, 2,000 rabbis. That's a lot of rabbis. 50 years. 50 years. Plus he taught at Boston University. Plus he was a major thinker and contributor to the modern Jewish landscape. No schlub. I believe that's the technical term. So he says, I am lonely, and what he's talking about is an existential loneliness. What he's saying is that, and he'll read in a minute, he follows the mitzvot. He's an observant Jew. He knows how to do Judaism, but he's still lonely. Why is he lonely? There's that angst. There is an angst in his words of saying he is lonely. He has communities to observe mitzvot with, but the loneliness is something about, it is a sense of fulfillment in this journey of life that he has not yet satisfied. Keep on reading.
I must address myself to the obvious question. Why am I beset by this feeling of loneliness and being unwanted? Now I'm getting in trouble.
Is it the Kierkegaardian?
Is it the Kierkegaardian anguish and ontological fear nurtured by the awareness of non-being threatening one's existence?
So let's just translate that into English. It's basically, yeah, I know you read it well. Right? I have most of us have no idea what you just read, but it sounded really smart. He's basically saying, right? It's basically saying that in the face of God, an all-powerful God, and recognizing the smallness of the self, that one person is feeling alone because in their smallness, there is no connection with any other being. They're just simply subject to an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-authoritative God. That's what he's talking about, okay? He's saying, but it's not that. Please continue.
Okay. That is threatening one's existence that assails me, or is this the feeling of loneliness solely due to my own personal stresses, cares, and frustrations? Or is it perhaps the result of the pervasive state of mind of Western man who has become estranged from himself, a state with which all of us as Westerners are acquainted?
So stop right there, because David Brooks is going to pick up on that, and he's going to talk about that again and again and again. Let me bring back this week's article, which I didn't quote here, but you'll read it. Okay, and he talks about Native American culture, and he says in the 18th century, when the Europeans were coming to this country, they began to blend with the Native American culture. And what there is in record is, while there was attempts to bring Native Americans and to assimilate them into European society, Native Americans never lost their sense of community and their sense of self-identity or identity amongst community. They never lost that. In fact, when you left the Native American alone, what would happen? The Native American would inevitably go back to his community. What happened more often than not, and in large numbers, was that the Europeans who came to this country ended up going and adopting Native American communal styles. Think Dances with Wolves by Kevin Costner. Remember that? Right? Remember that movie? The guy was like, I'm going in to make war with him. The next thing you know, he's called Dances with Wolves, and he's marrying the girl and all that other stuff, right? That's what David Brooks is talking about, and he's responding to Soloveitchik. He's saying we live in a world and a time when we build structures which we call privacy. In our quest to live privately, in which we have very sophisticated, elegant forms of privacy, everything from our cars to our gated homes to our smartphones, in which we have only the access to information in this little compact thing that nobody else in the world has except for us, hopefully, until somebody breaks into it, God willing, and you have the insurance protection to make sure that doesn't happen. Living in a world like that separates ourselves so much from other people that we lose the sense of community and society. And some people go running from this, and they go running into communities like Native American societies that are totally built on each other. I have to make one more quick digression and then we'll go on, just so you can understand what I'm talking about. How many of you know about Uber? Uber's amazing. Uber is amazing. And watch what happens in the next 10, 15 years, because this is the change in climate. Maybe because our next generation has responded to what we're talking about here and is going to start to live differently. What's Uber? Well, you could get Uber and somebody could pick you up by yourself and take you somewhere. But for the most part, Uber is shared driving. It is what we call a shared economy. And it's not a taxi cab who picks you up in his own little, labeled car. It's somebody else, just like you and me. Is anybody an Uber driver in here? I may need an Uber later, by the way. Right? You could be an Uber driver. That's how amazing it is, right? The idea that people are taking care of other people's needs, sharing the needs of each other in community. We didn't create a new taxi company to serve our needs. We decided to solve our needs amongst each other. That's what's going on. That's what he's talking about. That's what Soloveitchik was fighting against. That's what all of us are kind of running up against. And when we realize that there is a world that has enabled us to be totally by ourselves, guess what the consequence is? We're lonely. We're totally lonely in the world. We have plenty of friends. We have plenty of places to go. We have more than enough stuff, and we are completely and totally isolated because our lives do not crash into each other. And when our lives don't crash into each other, we don't belong to each other, and we are so comfortable in our own self-awareness and our own self-congratulations of what we do and what we accomplish, we are less of human beings. We are not fully realized as our humanity expects us to be. That's what Judaism is trying to teach us too. Keep on reading.
He looks upon himself as a stranger in modern society, which is technically minded, self-centered, and self-loving, almost in a sickly, narcissistic fashion, scoring honor upon honor, piling up victory upon victory, reaching for the distant galaxies, and seeing in the here and now sensible world the only manifestation of being. What can a man of faith, like myself, living by a doctrine which has no technical potential, by a law which cannot be tested in the laboratory, steadfast in his loyalty to an eschatological vision whose fulfillment cannot be predicted with any degree of probability, let alone certainty, even by the most complex, advanced mathematical calculations. What can such a man say to a functional utilitarian society which is a seculum-oriented and whose
I have no idea what that word is, by the way. I'm just going to say. Anybody know what that word means? Yeah, you can come back, sure.
Okay, I think that was a good guess pronunciation, though. And whose practical reasons of the mind have long ago supplanted the sensitive reasons of the heart.
Beautiful. Yeah, I have no idea. That was a zinger, okay? This is Soloveitchik, by the way, Rabbi, the Rav, okay? The Rav who studied, his PhD was in Hermann Cohen. He studied in Berlin with the Rabbi, Menachem Mendel Schneerson. What very interesting, it's a little another parenthetical note. Soloveitchik and Schneerson studied together in Berlin. Schneerson was studying modern secular philosophies before he came and became the Chabad rabbi, which the people claimed him and said that he was only a Torah devout human being and knew nothing of the rest of the world. In fact, there's a picture of him without a kippah in one of those pictures with him and the Rav. And you know what his disciples did? They went into that picture and they figured out how to digitally put on a kippah so that the Rav and the Rebbe, I am not joking you, the Rav and the Rebbe who were in 20th century Germany before the Holocaust weren't wearing kippah because that's what people didn't do, even rabbis. And they put on a kippah for him. You see what we're fighting against? You see what we're fighting against? It's going to get in deeper, okay? Please.
The length of time roughly equal to the potential lifetime of a person. Okay. A seculum is a length of time roughly equal to the potential lifetime of a person, or the equivalent of the complete renewal of a human population. The term was first used by the Etruscans.
Thank you very much. Wow. Woo. I feel educated. If you learn nothing tonight, you learned seculum. Thank you very much.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, thank you. And Wikipedia, hopefully it's correct. Yeah, right, exactly. But I like that even better, okay? Yeah. I know. I love digressions, and there's just something else I got to do, and you're going to entertain me for a second. And if I've gone too far, you'll tell me afterwards. So nowadays we're talking about transgender folks, and there is a term called cisgender. Okay, so trans, the opposite of trans in Latin is cis, C-I-S. So what is cisgender? Cisgender, if somebody is a cisgender, it is the gender that a person identifies with that is corresponding to the sexual organs that they were born with. In other words, if you identify as a woman and you have organs that identify you physically as a woman, then you would be identified as a cisgender, which is a seculum, right? You could have just said, it's just a period of life, right? A period of time. How do we know how long people are going to live, right? About that long. About that long. Or a seculum. Oh, they're totally different. But as interesting as that question is, it is so off topic, and it's my fault for taking us afield, and we have to come back. Okay, so I'll answer that, but after the lecture. Okay, so come back to what we're saying. Okay, let's read the next paragraph. Are you doing okay, Jane?
I'm fine. Yeah,
all right.
this makes it easy.
Great.
Okay. The purpose of this paper, then, is to define the great dilemma confronting contemporary man of faith. Of course, as I already remarked, by defining the dilemma, we do not expect to find its solution, for the dilemma is insoluble. However, the defining itself is a worthwhile cognitive gesture, which I hope will yield a better understanding of ourselves and our commitment. Knowledge in general, and self-knowledge in particular, are gained not only from discovering logical answers, but also from formulating logical, even though unanswerable questions.
I love that just take that home and read it and think about it for a while. So what he said, this is what Brooks is saying as well. The end of this lecture is not more answers on how to live a better life. The road to character is not filled with answers. Just do this and you'll live a better life. The road to character is learning how to ask really good questions. The road to character is learning how to ask really good questions. Not necessarily answer them, but to ask really good questions. And if you can find the place to ask really good questions, then you know that you've found yourself on the road to character. So let's see how he takes this. Two more paragraphs on Soloveitchik, and then we'll bring it back into our book. Please.
In Genesis 1, we read, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male, and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have domination." Dominion, over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the heaven, and over the beast, and all over the earth.
Okay, stop right there. Right? That's Adam 1. Adam 1, so Soloveitchik derives his thesis in this essay about the two different kinds of Adam from Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. And the creation of the human being in Genesis 1, as Jane just read so beautifully, is what is the purpose of the human being? To be what? To be fruitful and multiply. To what, Dove? What did you? Oh, I thought I heard you say. Oh, you're listening. Right, to dominate, subdue, look at the words, right? To dominate over the fish of the sea, the fowl, over the beasts, and to subdue it, okay? It doesn't say, but in Hebrew, right? Kivshuha. What are human beings supposed to do? We are supposed to be the masters of all of creation. That's Adam 1, okay? Now please read Adam 2.
In Genesis 2, the account differs substantially from the one we just read. And the eternal God formed the man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And the eternal God planted a garden eastward in Eden. And the eternal God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to serve it and keep it.
Thank you. Now what's Adam 2? How would you define Adam 2? Servant. Yes, he is a part of nature, right? And right, he's not having dominion over nature. He's a part of nature. Good. Anything else? He's contemplative. That's a wonderful, wonderful read of that, and that's exactly what it is. Right? He says that the second man is a contemplative human being. Well, and because it says a man became a living soul, so contemplative, I think, might be the second one. Okay, anything else? He's alone. Interesting, right? Right? And the first one, Bira'otam, and this one, he's alone. Is he lonely? It doesn't say. But we could infer, because he's of nature and he's not in dominion over nature, he's not alone.
Right.
He's not alone. Now, in Soloveitchik's terms, he calls Adam 1 majestic man. Okay? Don't read Adam 1 as bad and Adam 2 as good. In fact, that's really one of the questions that we have to ask all the time. When we think about, the parts of human nature, why do we only have two? Okay? Why do we always have to do either ors? I'm a loving student of Rabbi Schulweis, and his philosophy again and again and again didn't talk about either or, but talked about both and. And here's one of his teachers who's giving us that example again. It's not just saying that Adam 1 is you're either Adam 1 or you're Adam 2. The Torah doesn't tell us only a story about Adam 1. The Torah doesn't only tell us a story about Adam 2. It is both Adam 1 and Adam 2. And Adam 1 is majestic man, and Adam 2 is covenantal man. And then what he's going to do is he's going to read in the story, which is amazing. Once, maybe this year, try to read the Torah with Adam 1 and Adam 2. And when you read the characters of the story, try to figure out, are they Adam 1 type of characters or are they Adam 2 type of characters? Because now we have David Brooks, who thousands of years after the Torah was given, revealed, whatever we call it, now begins to write his book. And he's been ruminating on the ideas that we're about to read for about 2 years before he writes the book. And you want a quick question? Adam 1 is majestic man, and Adam 2 is covenantal man. Okay? Yeah.
In the dominion aspect, whereas Adam 2 is a more rounded individual that has a functional aspect, which is the serve and keep it part, but the living soul part is the more rounded aspect.
It's a very nice response, and part of what I hear is also, it's kind of like wine, right? We like taste delicious wine. I know you guys like wine, right? So this is great, right? So when you taste different kinds of wine, you begin to understand sort of the palates and the dimensions of it. And you were reading that, and Les did this before as well, when he talked about Adam 2 being more contemplative. It doesn't say explicitly that he's contemplative. It's more of we're reading into it. I think you're correct. I think there's an accuracy that's saying that there is a human being, there's an aspect of our humanity that is predicated on building, constructing, on control, and on dominion of the world around us. And there is this aspect of us being soft and well-rounded and more cooperative with the world around us. Is that, I think, did I get to what you were saying?
And yet the examples you were giving at arm's length. You're not actually interacting with someone
Mm-hmm.
in any deep way. You're not actually getting to know that other person necessarily. You may be interacting a lot, and maybe more with a lot more people than you've ever interacted with, but not necessarily deeply.
That's a great point. It's a great point, and Uber is a very interesting kind of example which deserves its own analysis. The response is, if you've ever taken an Uber with a bunch of other people, it's amazing. Even if you try to sit there and be quiet, there's a volume that's happening. It doesn't always happen that way, but the times that I've done it have been amazing. So, but even then, even if you have these like lovely conversations with these random people in the car because you're all going to a similar location at the same time, it's like talking to the person sitting next to you on an airplane. Remember, we used to do that. we may not do that so much anymore, but that used to be a pretty common thing. You never really know somebody deeply out of that, but there's something about the collision of human life that sort of promotes it. Quick comment, and then we'll move on.
Okay, let me see if I can do it quickly. You know, one thing that I'd like to mention, and maybe you're going to mention it later, David Brooks is doing this now, and he is probably close to 60, 55, 60. I don't think he would trade his previous life and his New York Times success for getting this knowledge sooner. He's at a point where he can take time to think about this. He would not have thought about it, nor do I think that any of us in this room, except maybe if there's a few younger people, we have time to do it. And if you notice, Adam 1, be fruitful and multiply. I can't multiply at this moment, but I was able to multiply before. So I have a lot of, seriously,
No, that's
I
great.
have time. Somebody once
love
said,
it.
when your daughters can bathe themselves and dry their own hair, you have a lot more time. So I think to go in either or, we need to work, we need to raise our kids, and then later, we have time.
Right. Wonderful. Great comment. And I think just to respond, one is that we live in a world that focuses so much on the success of Adam 1, whether it's raising our kids to wash and bathe themselves, or it's having a successful career, that making it in this world is achieving a certain level of success in Adam 1 dimension. It doesn't negate Adam 2. Actually, what happens to most of us is that we say, we'll get to Adam 2 when we have more time. And that's what he's saying. He's challenging that assertion. And he's saying, by dividing Adam 1 and Adam 2 based on time, that's a fallacy that we promote and perpetuate. And that what we really ought to be doing is cultivating the whole self all along. Now, I would say when you're talking about younger people, one of the things that we hope we will see, this is the optimism of the next generation, they're going to learn how to adapt so that success can be both kinds of Adam. They feel it. They want it. That's right, but there is the clash right now is about a society that places certain needs. There's an economic need here. There's a certain functionality to living that prevents that from being a reality at this point. But there may be a balancing. Hi, yes, please, and then we'll come back. Oh, I'm so sorry. You know what? Go ahead and I saw your hand. I did not see the other hands. I would never forget you. Judy, and then Evelyn, and Dove, are you okay? You wanted to say something too.
There's 4 more people.
Okay, good.
Rabbi, there's 4 more people that want to say something, so do you want comments?
Yeah, let's take a good comment break, and then we'll go back into the text.
I just want to say something from younger generation. I feel like there is a balance in life that, yes, you have to do all of these things and being successful and raise the children, but you also have to build yourself and have a time to learn more about yourself and to build a character. And if you're really interested in that, you always find time to do that.
Yeah, it's true. Like the fallacy that we don't have time is something that often traps us. In fact, it trapped a generation of us.
So I want to go back to what Alan was saying about the impersonalization thing that you said that in the Uber there's no real contact. It reminded me of Rabbi Feinstein's talk about Buber and the I thou.
Right.
And
Wonderful.
It's so what you're talking about. I remember the example he gave of the waitress in the restaurant, and she's just the person serving you. She's not a person in your life. And I'm going to have a big birthday party coming up soon, and I decided to invite my housekeeper, and she was shocked that I invited her.
Yeah.
But I wanted her to know, and I thought of Rabbi Feinstein's Buber lecture.
Very nice.
That I didn't want her to think she's just there to clean my house, that she's a person.
Thank you.
And so I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
And personalizing.
Thank you. Thank you. In addition, to not to negate what you just said, but nothing about this is revolutionary. David Brooks does not fancy himself as the 21st century modern philosopher who is presenting a system of thinking and seeing the world as radically or dramatically different than anybody in the previous century. On the contrary, we have so much to chew on and digest from the great thinkers of the 20th century, the 19th and 20th century, and we still have to accommodate them, that we're just trying to figure out how do we move the conversation along before we, implode or destroy ourselves. Yes?
This is somewhat like what she was saying. I don't think that you have to wait.
What is your name so we could say she with the name? Tatiana.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think we have to wait till we're old to think of these things. I think it's very important to think of them when we're younger, when we are raising children. Maybe not write a book,
Yeah.
but to think about neighbors
Yeah.
and our children's friends and all of these things. I think this should be an ongoing thing from young youth.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you. There is a lot of room for this ongoing thing. And to plug, look, we're in a synagogue, and we are thoughtful about this concept called Judaism. And Judaism speaks to this. Religions speak to this need to cultivate character alongside physical and communal well-being. Character well-being is equally important. It's not about the answers. Good religion is not just telling you how to do good. It's about how to be good. And good Judaism is about learning that complexity. That's why we left it with what I think Soloveitchik did wonderfully, is he said, it's not about the logical outcomes of the knowledge of practicing Judaism. It's about the logic that one discovers in being able to ask unanswerable questions, to ask questions deeply. If you can learn how to ask questions deeply, you can be on the road to character.
Before she does, I just want to mention Tatiana is one of our newest members in the synagogue. And
Use the microphone.
the young ones, and we're so happy to have her here.
Welcome, Tatiana. All right. Welcome.
Can I just add a little 2 cents?
Yeah.
Or then you want me to start reading again?
Sure.
Just my 2 cents. I have 2 children who are CPAs. Those of you that know me, my father is going to be 91. He's a CPA. My brother's a CPA. And my youngest CPA, he was writing a number of blogs for an online accounting magazine. And one of the articles he wrote about was 4 different CPAs. And just how times have changed, whereas when my father this was working to survive because he was from the Depression. He grew up during the Depression, and my brother is a workaholic. And get to my son, and he has, as you said, the balance in life. He wants to be able to have time for his family. He wants to be able to run marathons and to train for that. But he also wants to be a success and work, and not just have clients, but know them personally, know what's important. And I think that's really, part of it.
Thank you. I do think Again, the end of it. So we're going to hold off on questions for now. Hold off from them for a while. But the last comment, which is a wonderful one to bring us back into the reading, is that there is, this is not a prescription for change. This is a description of how we are and might yet be. And for many of us, including him, who's reaching middle age, realizes just how deep that separation is between what he's going to title the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. Let's read a little bit about that. Okay, go ahead.
It occurred to me that there were two sets of virtues, the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the skills you bring to the marketplace. The eulogy virtues are the ones that are talked about at your funeral, whether you were kind, brave, honest, or faithful. Were you capable of deep love?
Stop right there. Right? So those are the opening words of the book. That's his thing that he's been perseverating on for 2 years. Resume virtues versus eulogy virtues. Now, remember I asked you to think about those things. What are those experiences or those qualities that you would define yourself? I want you to think about, are those things that you define yourself to be, are they resume virtues or are they eulogy virtues? More than likely, as you're still thinking about what you're going to say to the person sitting next to you when we get to this exercise, you're thinking about eulogy virtues. And read on, because he thinks that that's how most of us think. Please continue.
We all know that the eulogy virtues are the more important than the resume ones, but our culture and our educational systems spend more time teaching the skills and strategies you need for career success than the qualities you need to radiate that sort of inner light. Many of us are clearer on how to build an external career than on how to build inner character.
Yeah, keep going.
But if you live for external achievement, years pass, and the deepest parts of you go unexplored and unstructured. You lack a moral vocabulary.
Stop right there. What a beautiful sentence, and what a beautiful phrase to hold on to. A moral vocabulary. You are here tonight to develop your moral vocabulary. You brought your dictionaries, you've opened up your books, and you're writing in those lines which define your moral sensibility, your moral identity. Okay? Some of them are universal, some of them are deeply personal. That's what we do. Please.
It is easy to slip into a self-satisfied moral mediocrity. You grade yourself on a forgiving curve. You figure as long as you are not obviously hurting anybody and people seem to like you, you must be okay. But you must live with an unconscious boredom, separated from the deepest meaning of life and the highest moral joys. Gradually, a humiliating gap opens between your actual self and your desired self, between you and those incandescent souls you sometimes meet.
Beautiful. Okay, remember those incandescent people that he meets along the way once a month? Those really good neshamas, we call them lamed vavniks in the Jewish tradition, just the absolutely righteous good people that are just working miracles in secret and in public every single day. He's saying at the end of that if you can't begin to see yourself through the eyes of those kinds of people that you meet, it becomes not humbling, it becomes humiliating. You realize just how empty you really are. The lonely man of faith, so says Soloveitchik, is the person who knows how to practice Judaism really well, but doesn't live it with character, live it with a sense of purpose, a sense of service, a sense of desire to grow from it. It's a great challenge. So let's take a few minutes. We're going to take a few minutes to go through what the book has to say. I brought out my iPad because, welcome to the 21st century, I do not have the book in print form. I was looking for the pages so that I could give you the pages in which to look at these quotes that you're about to read. Sadly, I cannot do that because the page numbers do not appear in this particular form. But what you do have in a very, very technical term, is the location of the page in the book. So I have given you, this is a new publishing thing for me, by the way. I'm an English major, okay? I learned how to properly annotate, okay, according to the MLA and the ABA standards, all that stuff, okay? Nope. A, you don't need it anymore. And B, what do you do when all of a sudden it's on an iPad and it's not in your book? So what I given you was as best as I could to clip these. Okay? So it says location such and such and location. The first section, so if you take a look at a few sections, Adam 1, Adam 2 is basically the introduction. There's this thing called crooked timber, the little me, the big me, and then we're going to stop there for a few minutes. So we're just going to give you, little me and the big me, and we're going to stop there for a few minutes and then we'll share. Okay? Crooked timber, let me read for you. Thank you very much, Jane. Crooked timber is a concept that he takes from Immanuel Kant, and look at what he means. People who are humble about their own nature are moral realists. Again, a beautiful word. What a great line. People who are humble about their own nature are moral realists. So to really, not humble bragging, not making yourself smaller, but people who recognize their selves among nature, the more Adam 2-like that they are what he calls moral realists. Not moral idealists, not moral perfectionists, but moral realists. What's the goal? To be a moral realist, which means that sometimes you're imperfect, and you have flaws, and you make mistakes, and you're impulsive, which means in your impulse you have jealousy and rage and anger and lust and all kinds of feelings and all kinds of experiences that we might even call sinful. The greatest sin that Brooks talks about in other places is not all those sins of impulse. The greatest sin that people identify is when they locate a sense of shame about an experience that they had and they don't do anything about it. It's one thing to feel like you did something wrong and to feel badly about it, but the greatest sin is if you've done something wrong, you feel badly about it, and you do nothing to correct it. That's the moral bankruptcy that he's trying to fight against by writing a book like this. And what he says is that the people who are truly humble, as we continue, moral realists, they are aware that they are all built from crooked timber. To borrow from Immanuel Kant's famous line, out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. Out of the crooked timber of humanity. We think that the aspiration should be a certain kind of moral perfection, right? If we follow the mitzvot, if we follow the Torah, if we come to shul on Shabbos, if we're nice to the people in the parking lot when we come in and when we go, and if we go to the grocery market, I know, hold your tongue because that's not so easy, right? If we go to the grocery market and somebody knocks into our shopping cart and they don't apologize and we don't get angry at them, right? If we're morally perfect like that, if only that were the case, then we would all be like a better humanity. But that is just not the case. And the sad truth is that the stuff that we feel badly about, the stuff that affects us, happens all the time, every single day. And as much as I personally would like to say that I am a more morally perfected character because I'm a rabbi, that somehow the journey that I've personally taken in my life is more perfect than you, would be the implication. I can't say that. I can't say that. I can't teach that. I can't preach it. I don't think that's the message. The message is we're on the journey together, and humanity is like crooked timber. What's crooked timber? Right? It's twisted, it's torn. It has its own beauty to it, actually. You ever been up on the shores of the Sound? I guess it's like Puget Sound up north of Seattle, and there's like a wash, and you get all of the like driftwood, right? Imagine that for a minute, because that's what humanity's like. It's sort of like this driftwood washed upon the shore. What once were like, great pillars of trees have become timber. crooked timber is washed upon the shores of life and experience. So flip the page. But anyway, you okay, Menashe? You had your hand raised. You're good. All right. All right, the little me. Now, he talks about in the book the little me and the big me. Little me is going to be the humble one. The big me is going to be sort of the grandiose one. You might want to say little me is Adam 2, and the big me is Adam 1. That's not always the case, but if we're looking for dichotomies to help us understand this, it's probably better than some. So look at what the little me, I give you a little excerpt. It's from location 286 in chapter 1. It says, the self-effacing person is soothing and gracious, while the self-promoting person is fragile and jarring. Humility is the freedom from the need to prove you are superior all the time, but egotism is a ravenous hunger in a small space. Self-concerned, competitive, and distinction hungry. Humility is infused with lovely emotions like admiration, companionship, and gratitude. Thankfulness, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey, said, is a soil in which pride does not easily grow. Beautiful. What a wonderful sense. Thankfulness, gratitude is the soil in which pride does not easily grow. It doesn't mean that you can't be grateful and proud at the same time, but you better be nurturing that garden very carefully to make something like that grow. Because typically the pride that grows in our gardens are like weeds of egotism and self-concern, of our own distinction and our own sense of accomplishment. It's when Adam 1 and Adam 2 collide. It's when we try to be grateful and humble, and yet we fall into these categories of being humble and grateful to advance the way that other people see us, the way that we are successful in the world. There's a sensitivity here that we also are being asked to pay attention to and focus on. Because there are many people that walk the world with a certain sense of kindness and magnanimity, and you look at them and you're like, wow, they are so great. In fact, they get put up on the television screens and the movie screens, and we see them all the time. We even may want to vote for one of them to become president of the United States, or not. Was that political? Not at all. Oh, okay. But we look to other people so much because we're craving this insight, and yet there's nowhere in our world where people are going to find it. Except if you come and wander around places like this. Because the people that are being described here are the people that are walking the halls every single day. And they're not doing it to make themselves feel great. They're doing it because it's not only the right thing to do, it's the right thing to be. And they're looking for friends. So if you're looking for friends, you're going to find a lot of people like this inside this building. Take a look at the big me. Again, the big me is not a negative. It's not the or. It's the and. At each step along the way, when most people would have sought out comfort and ease, what economists call self-interest, or wise psychologists call happiness, she, and here he's referring to a woman called Doris Day, who was, her story is escaping me. She decided to develop a nonprofit, and she's in the book. Who is she? What? No, Doris Day. Social justice advocate, right? Yeah, she's not a Jewish person, but anyways, Doris Day, that's the she of the paragraph. Let's read, it doesn't matter. She wasn't just choosing to work at a nonprofit institution in order to have a big impact. She was seeking to live in accord with the Gospels, even if it meant sacrifice and suffering. So the big me looks at the world and says, it's not to my benefit to put myself in a place of jeopardy, to risk my life. It's not to my benefit to help other people because you know what? At the end of the day, I need to put food on my table. You know what? At the end of the day, I need to make sure that I'm comfortable so that I can bring comfort to others first. What Brooks is trying to say by telling a story like this is that there are people who serve as the examples you'll never heard. Like, I can't even tell you who Doris Day is because she's not a famous one for us. But what I can tell you is that this kind of self-sacrifice in order to better the lives of others, that's the foundations of a kind of character building that Brooks is talking about. Now, when I think about this, I think about what's our Jewish corollary to this? And the number one person that I think about is Abraham Joshua Heschel. And if you study Heschel, you have to reread him after rereading this book because he makes him even more brilliant and even more prescient and even more important at this particular point in time in history. So look at what he says. This is the beginning of the book of prophets. The book called The Prophets, in which he outlines some of the major prophetic heroes and tries to show through each of their writings how their moral messages have relevance even in the mid to late 20th century. So look at what he writes in the introduction. He says, instead of showing us the way through the elegant mansions of the mind, the prophet takes us to the slums, the niggardliness of our moral comprehension, the incapacity to sense the depth of misery caused by our own failures is a fact which no subterfuge can elude. That's fancy language. But what he's saying is that the inability for the human being to recognize that their failures, his failures, your failures, my failures, the things that we do that cause harm to others, brings misery into the world, is something that he says there's no kind of mechanism that's going to jar us out of that. That's part of our human experience. So along comes the prophet, he's going to say, who screams and rails against the human community of his time and tries to say, people, wake up. Your failures are causing misery upon other people. And maybe they'll wake up and they'll realize it. And maybe the prophetic message will be heard, or maybe not. The sad truth is, historically, the latter has been the case more often, and that it has not been that we've heard the prophetic message loudly enough. The big me is grand. Seeing the world with a certain kind of grandeur. It's not that humility takes you out of the world. It's not just being kind and humble and subservient to the world around you, serving the world. You actually have to take a step forward and you have to speak up for the injustice of the world. That's what a person of character does. And you know that you're a person of character, according to Brooks and according to this line of thinking, when it hurts. You know, we talk about federation giving. You give until it hurts, right? You give until you don't have any more money in your bank account. What does it mean to give until it hurts? It means when it takes you out, when it jars you from that sense of your incapacity to comprehend that you are not a complete human being unless you help other people beyond yourself. It's bigger than you. When you realize that you're doing something that's bigger than yourself, that's when you know that you've begun to live a life of character. That's when you know you have a life of character. You can be a kind person. You can be a generous person. You can give in order to make a couple people feel better, and that's great and noble and good. But if you feel a sense of satisfaction from that, you haven't fully realized this character value that we're talking about. You have to give in such a way that it takes you out of yourself. You don't give because your self-concern has been met. You don't give because it feels good to you. It's beyond an altruism. There's no sense of accomplishment in helping others and serving the others. It's a sense of responsibility. It's a sense of what you do. And even if it means that it comes at a cost to you, that doing in the world doesn't cost anything at all because it's just what it is. It's just what it is. And David Brooks and the prophets, Heschel and Soloveitchik, and all of us are trying to teach that that's the step that we need to make each and every day to break ourselves of this conception of Adam 1, that if only we do certain kinds of good, we'll feel better. But to be truly covenanted with God, to be a truly covenanted being in Soloveitchik's language, to be a eulogized, virtuous person in Brooks's language, is to be a person who puts him or herself in a place that is bigger than themselves. When you see that the world is bigger than you, when you find places, wherever those may be, that are bigger than you, you've become a person who's on the road to character. That's how you grow a soul. It's just like growing muscles. It's just like growing plants, even in the ground. If you plant a seed in the ground and you give it soil, the plant has to take root. It has to push beyond its capacity in order to grow. The same thing with moral character and moral realism. You have to push yourself beyond what seems to be your capacity in order to grow. Jewish life helps push that limit. Community of learning helps push that limit. And telling our stories, actually sharing of ourselves a little bit more than we've done before, that helps us grow too. So I want to take a minute before we're done, and I want to invite you to be courageous. I've given you enough time. Turn to somebody near you, a friend or a new friend, and share 3 things with the other person. And if you're the listener, be a really good listener. Don't judge. Don't critique. Don't evaluate and say which one is good or bad. Actually, to be a good listener is to repeat and say, this is what I hear you saying. I hear you. Those are wonderful. Give those kinds of compliments. And do that with each other for just a few minutes. Carol, I see the discomfort already falling over you. Yes, I mean this for real.
First of all, does he explain in the book how he does this? Is he just listening what he thinks people should do? Or does he actually say, so after writing this book, I realized that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Does he list what he did to do this?
Well,
Because I see him
absolutely.
all the time on television. I mean, he doesn't necessarily
Right. That's beautiful.
demonstrate that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, yes, and I think the first part that we read talks about him identifying that he's not that person, and he's grappling with that. He struggles with that. And he's not saying that he's now a more character deep person. He's actually kind of saying, this is what I see, what people who have character look like this. So I'm inviting all of you to try and extend a little bit. And I think what he did, which was a good beginning, is he called himself pretty shallow. It's amazing. Like, I didn't get it. When you read it in the book, he talks about how empty and vapid his life was. Even though he talks about society and culture and the way that people are supposed to behave and all that stuff, which sounds really nice and morally correct, he throws it all away because it doesn't mean anything unless you become a person of character. And what he says is the people that, if you read the beginning, the people who radiate inner light, Carol, are the people who behave this way. They serve other people, not because it makes them feel good, but because this is what they do. And he wants that. He's desperate for it. So are we too. So let's try for a minute. Find a friend. I'm inviting you to be courageous. You can find a friend, and then I'm going to take a few questions and wrap us up. Okay? Do this first. So go back to the front page. It's all right there. Front page. Think of 3 defining moments or qualities that define who you are. Share these moments with a friend. If you don't have 3 moments that you could think of, take a minute to imagine which ones you would like to have and share those. Okay? All right. Go for it. If you don't know the person sitting next to you, tell them your name. Anybody need a buddy? I'll be a buddy. Anybody not have a buddy? Come. Come sit here.
take rabbis through his and he's not a pope.
That's a great question. Oh, Les asked a great question. So everybody, just take a minute, wrap up, and then we'll be right back.
When you said humble, you know the story. The rabbi goes to the Aron Kodesh and says, "Oh Lord, I am but dust in your eyes, I am nothing." And the president Shul goes before the Aron Kodesh and says, "Oh Lord, I am nothing, I am but dust in the earth." And the Shabbos comes in, and the Shabbos goes to the Aron Kodesh and says, "Oh Lord, I am nothing, I am but dust in your eyes." And the president Shul turns to the rabbi and says, "Look who thinks he's nothing."
Exactly, right? Look who thinks he's nothing, right? Thank you. If you didn't hear the joke, ask Dov Feinstein to tell you a joke after. He's got a good one for you. How'd that go? So, how many of you were able to finish or need more time? So for this group, because I think everybody has got it, we're gonna do a quick wrap up because it's already 9 o'clock. The hour is nigh. We're gonna do a quick wrap up, and then please continue. And I'm glad that you're getting to share. So there's one question. Les, do you have a microphone over there? Say it nice and loud.
We started with the idea that the books say we're talking about being who you are. Okay, now I got it. We started by talking about Brooks' idea that we're talking about a person of his beingness, her beingness, who that person is. But we seem to have gone back to what the person does as to, you know, their life and such. I was trying to see, okay, where does it go from what you do to who you are?
Right. It's a beautiful question, and I think it's that idea of like how do you have resume virtues and eulogy virtues, and eulogy virtues are ones that, like, if you've ever had the exercise to write your own eulogy, if you've ever had that, it's kind of a fun exercise. Well, try it, right? When you're 120 years old, start with that, okay? What your great-great-grandchildren are going to say about you, because they know you so well, because your eyes never dimmed, and your gait never slowed, and you just went to sleep at 120, and that was that. So when you think about your eulogy virtues, and you think about who you are, it is as much a description of yourself as it is how others and the world around you perceive you to be. And what I think is being introduced here is that it's not something that you can just proclaim. It is not something easy that you could just simply self-identify. He writes about this kind of like mediocrity of sort of a moral relativism, and basically being more forgiving of yourself when you haven't really accomplished the high moral standards that you've set for yourself. If you go back and you look at that quote. So being a person who becomes a one of character, who is one of character, begins with practicing a life of character. So the doing leads to being, and more examples of doing is how one comes to be. And I think that that's true, that we're not defined, even though we talked about singular moments, they may be defining moments because they contain the examples of doing, or they contain the experience of being in that one moment, that one act. So the positive moments are ones that contain the very best of who you are. And the ones that are shameful, the ones in which you realize that you're less than your best self, those are the ones that contain who you are as an incomplete soul or person or being. So the work is to try and create moments or discover moments in which the best of who you are is reflected in those moments. I find that's a lifelong journey. And I find that to be the most satisfying experience of a religious life, one would call a religious life. I find Judaism is a brilliant and a exciting and an everlasting and a complete experience of being that forever challenges me to strive towards a better sense of myself. I have high aspirations, and when I fall short of them, I am forgiving so that I don't stop, but I'm also challenging myself to rise above. And I think the same for all of us, and I'll leave it here. It's the last thing. So if you want another David Brooks article, you don't have to read the book. Did I just say that? Because I just said you have to read the book. Put that back. If you haven't read the book, you can also go online, because the article that he wrote in 2015, April 11th, 2015, is called The Moral Bucket List. You'll know it because it's on page 3 or whatever. The Moral Bucket List, April 11th, 2015. And the last thing that he leads is, so how do you move from doing to being? You have these qualities that you need to sort of embody. So what are the things? The humility shift, self-defeat, dependency leap, energizing love, the call within the call, and the conscious leap. Now, those are not easy terms to understand, and I'll hold on just a second, and I'll say very briefly what they are, and then I'll add, and I really want to take your question. The humility shift is recognizing that the world is bigger than you. Self-defeat is like Dwight David Eisenhower, who realized that his shortcomings could be transformed into strengths. He had a shortcoming of being short-tempered. But you can't be the commander of the armed forces and the president of the United States with a short temper. So what he would do is, when he ever had those feelings, he would write down the name of the person that was frustrating him, and he would tear it up and throw it into the trash. Now, good one, right? It doesn't solve the temper issue. But what happened over a lifetime was he became more moderate because he recognized those times that it was making him angry. So it's like the rubber band on the wrist concept. The dependency leap, right, is the difference between being rooted, which means that you belong to a community and people, that transforms to more than just Uber or airplane flights, but actually is when you're connected to people. And connection is a deep sharing. It's a sharing like you began tonight. The call within a call is to remember that there are causes bigger than you. And finally, the conscious leap is, like I said, is living life on purpose, because that's what we're here to do. Barbara? Right. That's a wonderful way to put it, right? This is not so far to reach. That's a really simple thing. But knowing that you're practicing the goal of living your life in balance is very challenging. And so that's character emerges out of that. That's wonderfully well said. So may we all have, as these months towards Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur begin with the Tisha B'Av day of commemoration this Saturday night here at Valley Beth Shalom, 7:30 p.m. Rabbis will be teaching from Adat Ariel, Burbank Temple Emmanuel, and Valley Beth Shalom. That when you come from Tisha B'Av to Yom Kippur, that the journey that you undertake of self-reflection and renewal is also a journey that brings you onto the road of character, one filled with balance, one filled with joy, one filled with the greatness of our potential and the people that we're meant to be. Thank you very much for coming to learn with me tonight. Thank you for coming tonight.